Making news this week, support for marriage equality pressure politicians before the federal election.
Unions express that juvenile officers no longer trust the Corrective Services Minister.
Alannah MacTiernan predicted the council amalgamation situation will become a Mexican standoff.
And Fremantle Prison welcomes its 3 millionth visitor.
This is the Evening News with Ivan Lowe and Danielle Staniskov.
Good evening. First tonight, a same-sex marriage rally was held in Perth, pressuring the federal government to make same-sex unions legal, as the federal election is less than a week away.
Australians who support same-sex marriage were determined to make their voice heard before the election. Approximately 150 people attended the protest held in Stirling Garden in Perth on Saturday afternoon. Demonstrators also remembered Amber Maxwell, one of their activists who have committed suicide last week. Protest speaker and leader Sam Cavallero, who is Amber's close friend, believed her death revealed discrimination towards heterosexual people.
It shows, I think, the sickness that exists in society and the discrimination that's against trans people. The fact that she couldn't find crisis accommodation, she couldn't find adequate medical care, she couldn't afford to get the medical treatments that she wanted.
Greens Federal Senator Scott Ludlam has also attended the demonstration, confident that marriage equality will win the vote one day.
The federal election's only 7 days away, but these campaigners have managed to persuade the Prime Minister of Australia, who's now on their side. Bit by bit, we're going to win this.
Raphael Lim, WAMN News.
Juvenile detention officers were outraged with the recent comments made by the Corrective Services Minister Joe Francis. The community and public sector union members expressed their lack of confidence towards Mr Francis, with the opposition asking the Premier to remove him from the portfolio.
Youth officers from Arcade Prison have demanded for Corrections Services Minister Joe Francis to be removed from his post after he portrayed them as lazy when addressing the media on Sunday. As a result, about 60 officers voted to pass a motion of no confidence in the minister at a meeting at Arcade Prison. Last week, Mr Francis had publicly criticised guards from the Banksia Hill Detention Centre, claiming half of them feigned sick at the weekend and did not turn up to work over the Banksia Hill riot in January this year. Opposition spokesperson Papalia accused the minister of ducking responsibility and shifting blame.
What was said by Minister Francis was an unjustified, cowardly attack by a completely dishonest government on people who are suffering the consequences of a bad decision by the Barnett government to shut one of only 2 juvenile facilities and cram all the juveniles into the remaining facility.
Tony Walkington from the Community and Public Sector Union said Mr Francis lied to the public to further the Barnett government's agenda to privatise West Australia's juvenile detention system.
Clearly, the government has an agenda. They're running down public services and selling them off to private interests. If they can run down juvenile detention, they have a number of companies who have got private interests that they want to hand over juvenile detention to.
State Corrective Services Minister Joe Francis had earlier said he would be examining the benefits of putting the juvenile detention centre's management out to tender, pointing to savings brought about by the privatisation elsewhere in the state's prison system, a claim that has garnered strong objections from the community and the public sector union. Shibs, WAMN News.
With the federal election coming up in a few days, most candidates from opposing parties are working hard to gain support. In this week's feature interview, I talked to Alannah MacTiernan about her campaign trail and discussed the topic of council amalgamations. Alannah MacTiernan, welcome to Evening News.
Thank you.
How's the election campaign going?
Oh, look, it's going pretty well. We're getting a positive response out there. There's no doubt things are a bit tough for Labor at a national level, but I think we're doing okay here in Perth.
Your major rival is Darryl Moore. What makes you a better choice for Perth people in this election?
Look, I think I bring a lot of experience to the job. I've had 25 years of public life, and I've really, I guess, I've demonstrated that I can deliver both in government and in opposition. And I think people know me. They know what I stand for, what I value, what I'm capable of doing, and I think my opposition is a bit of an unknown quantity.
Colin Barnett a few weeks ago has called for a major press conference and meet all the mayors together in Coburn, as you can recall. What's wrong with the local amalgamations plan that government's put up?
Well, because it It doesn't make sense, and particularly in our case, why would you split the city in half? We used to all be in the city of Perth. We're quite happy to meet his aspiration of reducing the number of councils. We're not arguing we have to stay by ourselves, but we're saying that we want to amalgamate with the city of Perth. But it's also that the process that he set up is really going to be completely unmanageable.
Why do you think it's not going to work?
Because he's trying to construct a process that looks like it is voluntary amalgamation when it is in fact forced amalgamation, and the fundamental dichotomy between a forced amalgamation and a voluntary amalgamation is such that he's trying to to make it appear like they're voluntary, and it's just not going to happen.
Okay, so you're trying to say he has broken his election promise?
I'm trying to say he's broken his election promise, but the process that's been set up is completely stupid. It requires councils to come together and voluntarily do something that they don't want to do, and so they're not going to do it. So we're going to have a Mexican standoff, and we're then going to have numerous inquiries running at the same time, and no one knowing at the end of the day what the result is going to be. It also depends on Mr Barnett getting a whole raft of legislation through the Parliament, and there's no guarantee that when people really understand what the nature of that legislation is, that we'll get that through the upper house.
WA museums will get state-of-the-art laboratories to look after their artefacts. The government has committed more than $6 million on this project. Martin Wilson has more.
The WA state government has revealed that they will be investing $6.5 million towards the Welshpool Research Facility for a new museum to be located in the Perth Cultural Centre. The museum project will include upgrading towards state-of-the-art new laboratories to care for the millions of artefacts and exhibits.
It is essential to have adequate laboratories to analyse the specimens and other preparation rooms so that the items can be properly preserved, restored and then prepared for display to the public.
The new state-of-the-art facilities will help care for those irreplaceable and valuable artefacts, including the iconic 24-metre-long blue whale skeleton found in the Bass River in 1898, which has been hidden from the public since 2004.
We need to ensure that these collections are properly documented, properly preserved, and they're still growing collections, of course, in order to ensure that we can call on the best material for the new museum project.
The state government has committed $428 million for the new museum, which will be opening in 2020 in the revitalised Perth Cultural Centre. This significant cultural project will be a major drawcard for the state's future. Martin Wilson, WAMN News.
The historic Fremantle prison reached its 3 millionth visitor this week. Minister Dr. Mike Nahan handed out 2 certificates of congratulations to a couple from Queensland.
This is the largest in terms of number of visitors site in Western Australia. A large number, about 40% of the visitors come from Western Australia, but 60 from overseas primarily, but also interstate.
The Fremantle prison is one of the world's heritage listed buildings constructed by convicted prisoners back in 1850. The prison was in service until its closing in 1991. It later reopened as a tourist attraction.
To our World Report, the civil war in Syria intensified with government forces allegedly using chemical attacks against the rebels in Damascus. President Bashar al-Assad's regime denied that 1,300 people died during the attack last Wednesday. United Nations Secretary Ban Ki-moon said that the use of chemical weapons violates international law. In Hong Kong, the supporters of primary school teacher Miss Lam have set up counters inviting people to sign for the US petition in Mongkok. Supporters claim that Ms. Lam is innocent and the whole incident was being exaggerated. A university professor created a petition on the White House website pleading the US government and international community to speak up for Ms. Lam. They need to obtain 100,000 signatures before the 15th of September in order to get Obama's attention. In Chile, infection from rabies disease is the highest it's been in 17 years. Local media reports that one person is in intensive care, listed in critical condition. It's known that stray dogs can easily transmit the virus to humans. Rabies is a disease that travels slowly through the body until it reaches the brain and affects the central nervous system.
And finally tonight, Hong Kong Mass Transit Railway announced that the old magnetic strip single journey train ticket will no longer be used. For the past 30 years, the ticket was one of the most common ways to take the train before the Smart Octopus card was invented in 1997. The MTR said starting in October, the old tickets will be replaced with a new smart ticket which are equipped with memory chip technology.
You must have used quite a few of them when you were a kid.
I got a stack of them at home actually.
I didn't know you were a rail enthusiast.
Now that you know. Well, that's how the world looks tonight. We have more news on our website.
We'll see you next week with reports on the federal election. Good evening.
Good night.